please join me in welcoming Bill George.
Thank you, Claire. It's a great privilege to be here. You know, I come by here at least once or twice a day. I've never been inside, so there with all the students coming in and everything. And Dunwoody is such an amazing place that it's just a privilege. So I want to thank Rich Wagner, Don Fish for inviting me to come over here today and have a chance to share with you my thoughts on leadership, which I do feel passionate about. But I just want to take just a moment to acknowledge what Dunwoody has become, because it's amazing that, you know, notice Minnesota's best career college, #1, one of the top schools in the country for vets, 99% job placement. I think at a time right now when so many college students are struggling to find jobs, to think that everyone here gets placed. And I think that brings me to the heart of the matter, which is that companies are looking for people with skills today, particularly technical skills, manual skills, technical skills, computer skills, all kinds of skills. And I think the world has really changed, and I think I want to talk about that. What I really want to talk about today is leading in today's world, because we're in a very different world. Hopefully coming out of COVID, I was going to say coming out, but hopefully coming out. But these experiences we've had, these crises we faced in the last 2 years have been dramatic. The greatest crises of my lifetime. Too young to know World War II, but certainly the combination of a major pandemic that affected every single person one way or another, families, huge numbers of deaths, the effect of having George Floyd's murder not far from here, a shock to all of us, I think. I think the whole economic downturn and the end now of war in Afghanistan, long-term wars, I think are going to have a much greater psychological effect on us than we've ever realized. So I just wanted to try to see if, at some risk, if we can project what that might mean and for us as leaders, because everyone in this room is a leader. Everyone that comes to Dunwoody is a leader. And I think the world desperately needs your leadership today. We need people that are willing to step up and lead. And leadership is not about your title. It's not about where you are in the organization. It's about the capability to inspire, to engage people, to empower people to step up and lead. So that's what I'd like to talk about, because you can make an enormous difference. I like the phrase I learned as a young man, bloom where you're planted. You don't have to wish you were somewhere else. You can have leadership right there. You don't have to have any direct reports. You don't have to have any big salary or anything. You can make a difference right now in helping solve problems and impacting people. And so we do have a lot of problems, certainly. Income inequality is a huge problem. The racial disparities right here in our own community and certainly throughout our country. And this tremendous shortage now of skilled labor. I mean, who would have guessed a year ago with a tremendous amount of unemployment, or 18 months ago, we encountered that we would be facing labor shortages everywhere, and that so many businesses, restaurants can't open, factories can't get enough people. It's very widespread. And I think this also reads on the changing nature of how people look at work. And I think we thought too long of work as just a job. We thought of it as too often as drudgery or something I have to do to feed my family. Of course we do. But I'd like to think that each of us gets joy and fulfillment from our work. And if we can find that joy and fulfillment, no matter what our job is, we will be very effective in what we do. And I think that, to me, is absolutely critical, that everyone find that. And I think all of us in leadership roles, that's our job, to bring that sense of joy, fulfillment to everyone in the organization and allow them to flourish. The real task of a leader today is not to preside an organization, not to dominate, not to direct an organization, but to recognize the unique skills of everyone in the organization and enable them to step up and use those skills to the betterment of the whole, to inspire, engage, and empower people in the organization to make a difference in their work. Again, they don't have to have a bigger title, they have to get promoted. I do think we have huge salary disparities, and we're not paying people anywhere close to what they were, whether you're talking about teachers or factory workers, people that work in a restaurant. I think we have to say, why should we employ anyone that doesn't make a living wage with decent benefits? I think this is critical. But for each of us, I think we're called to do what we love. We push people along oftentimes into where they should be. I've seen so many people going to Wall Street because they should be and they hate it. I think you should do what you do, and we each have differing skills, and to recognize what are the skills we have. Look, I couldn't either. I'm an engineer from Georgia Tech. I could not design a defibrillator for Medtronic, nor could I run a computer-controlled complex machine. I can assure you. And my son is a surgeon, and he has skills I could never have. He's not leading anything. He's a surgeon. And he's been doing this. He had 12 years of training after he got out of college. And he has tactical skills. He has mind-hand connection skills that I don't have. And he's extremely good at what he does. Should he go on to do something else? Should he be dean of the medical school? Should he be department chair? Why? He does what he loves, and he's really good at it. And I think that's what we should all do. But I think then we have to readjust all of our compensation, not to pay people on their level of the organization, but on what do they bring to the organization. And so we can reduce this huge income disparity that we have in our country. So I'd like to go back to the crisis we're in right now, or just coming out of. What have we learned from the COVID-19 crisis? Number one, we've learned the value of frontline workers. Let's face it, the country shut down, but the frontline workers had to be there. Who was it? Whether you're talking about people stocking shelves or running a factory to supply us or a meat packing plant, who are the people that are doing this? And we have not, for the last 20, 30 years, we've diminished the role of the front line. We've tried to pay less rather than paying more. It's ridiculous. We have a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. 15 should be a starting point. It was interesting, the CEO of Costco, who's a huge organization, employs a lot of people, said, we're at 16. He said, I'm not being altruistic. We want to recruit the best people, and we want them to stay. So we're prepared to pay that. We're going to pay good benefits. And I think that should be the philosophy, that people are well compensated. But I think we really learned the value of the front line. So people are sitting at home behind Zoom screens, but everyone else had to be front line to keep us going. And we've learned the problems of our overseas supply chains. And I think we've learned the value of leading healthy lives. And as my wife Penny has been so passionate the last 20 years, leading a healthy life is not the absence of disease. It's being healthy in mind, body, spirit, and being part of a community. I cherish this community. We've moved out and come back. We've always never really left the community for the last 51 years. So I think we've learned the value of leading a healthy life, one that where we feel good about ourselves. And with that health approach, we're going to have a much better chance of postponing, avoiding, or coping with disease when we have it. The third thing we've learned the value of advanced medicines. I mean, what happened in the vaccines business, I was on the board of Novartis and they had a big vaccines business. The shortest period of time, I think, is 4.5 years ever to create a vaccine. Normally it takes 7 or 8. They created breakthrough vaccines, all new technology, the Pfizer, Moderna technology, mRNA technology has never been used before. Stunning. And Dr. Fauci said, we need 50% effectiveness, and I was kind of raising my eyebrows at that, saying, well, that's just like a flip of the coin. 94%. Yeah, we're learning about variants, and we have to keep going. But it does show the value of research and development, and of engineers and scientists who can bring those to us to help save lives. I mentioned the murder of George Floyd, and it was a murder. It just shows what it really did. I felt like we had a Band-Aid on our arm, and it ripped the Band-Aid off in our community and showed there was a lot of cancer underneath. it shows the depth of the racial disparities. I don't have a single black friend who has not been abused by the police in one way or another. I haven't been. I can be driving 68 in a 55 zone, and maybe I'll get a ticket, but I'm not being slammed out against a car and no one's sticking a gun in my back. So those depth of those disparities, right here in our own community. And key to that, as my friend Alan Page says, is education. Skills-based education, so you can come out and take a job that you're making a difference right away. You don't have to wait for 10 years. You don't have to train. You're skilled, and you can make a difference right away. But it is education. And I think in many ways you fail people by not enabling them to get the education they want to have. By the way, speaking of education, Dr. Wagner, I would say we need to look at the German system, the apprentice system, where people are asked, what do you want to do when they're 14 or 15? The high schools, what they call the baccalaureate, is actually geared towards what they want to do. Maybe they love to read literature and Shakespeare. Maybe they hate to sit in the classroom to do that. Maybe they love to work with their hands. People to do what they love to do, and then recognize the value of that work and compensate them for it. So we've seen now these workforce shortages. These people are saying, I want to go back to that job. So as employers, those of you who are employers in the room, we need to create real value in the work for everyone. And we need to value the people. Compensation, but also rewards, not just financial rewards, but all kinds of rewards. So those are some of the challenges, I think. And I think the world needs your leadership. So what does that mean? Leadership has changed. We're done with the hierarchy, the idea of the boss on top telling everyone what to do. I think we're in an era of collaboration, of creativity, of innovation, and empowered people. And I will guarantee you that an empowered organization, people that are inspired about their work, like we were at Medtronic, or like what Hubert Jolie has done at Best Buy, will outperform a power-driven, tops-down, directed organization every time. Maybe not for 3 months, if you're only into 3 months, but certainly over the long term. And we've seen that time and again. And I think we need to think, what kind of leadership do we want? But to be that kind of leader, you have to know who you are, number one. And that comes out of your life story. It's something you should be proud of. One of the people was my student many years ago, in 2013, named Mary Barra. She later became CEO of General Motors about 9 months later. And if you look at, here's a woman that started on the production line as an inspector for General Motors at age 18. They enabled her to go to General Motors Institute, which is now called Kettering University. Then later they saw her talent, 4 or 5 years later, plucked her out and sent her back to get an MBA. But the point is, she's been with that company for her whole life. She knows the business, she knows the people, and she understands the nature of the work. General Motors went through a period of about 40 years. One reason they went bankrupt is they were run entirely by financial people. And they said, okay, a finance person's always going to be CEO, but the operator. And I've had close friends in high-level positions running big divisions in General Motors. They said every time a decision came between quality and design or cost, they just opted for cost every single time. They overrode me. This guy was running Buick, Olds, and Cadillac. And he told me every time I made a decision, I get overridden from the top. And you see the consequence of that, what happens when you do this. If you read the story of Boeing, I wrote 2 cases on Boeing. Boeing is an engineer's company, and they tried to make it into a cost-cutting company. They said, oh, we got a lot of excess here, we're going to take costs out. And so they did. And you see the consequence for Boeing when the 2 MAX planes went down. But now the 787 has never really been able to fly the way it was supposed to. And 777, the most popular plane, new plane, got grounded. And if you go deep into that story, what it was is management was not listening to its own people. If Medtronic has a problem, you got to listen to the people that know what they're talking about. You go to the engineers, and then everyone sits around the table and tries to solve the problem. But the person who has the greatest knowledge, not the title, should be the one that is the decisive decision maker. But to do that, I think we have to learn, as Mary Barra has, for her life story, to be who she is. And that's the key for each of us. Second, We learn from the challenges in our life, the crucibles, as I like to call them, the difficult times we faced. When things didn't go our way, I remember as a kid thinking I was going to be a leader and never being chosen for anything, and finally throwing my hat in a ring for president of senior class in high school and thinking I was far better qualified than the single person I was running against, and losing by a margin of 2-1. And then going off to Georgia Tech and trying to repeat my errors, running for office 6 times, losing all 6. So I'm a real loser, 0 for 7, because I didn't know how to lead. And the best thing that ever happened to me, some senior from Georgia Tech took me aside and said, Bill, no one's ever going to want to work with you, much less be led by you, because you're moving so fast to get ahead, you don't take time for other people. And that was like a blow to the solar plexus. They were right, because I really had to learn what it was all about. It was not about building a resume. It was about building life. It was about being there for people. And I spent a whole year trying to restructure my thinking and my life. And that experience had a tremendous impact on me in thinking about what I wanted to be, who I was. Fortunately, I did it at a young age, in my late teens, early 20s. But I think we learn from these difficult times in life. We don't learn from our successes. I was a tennis player in high school and college. I tell you, I didn't learn anything when I won, because I thought I was better than I was, but when I lost, I found out what all my weaknesses were. When we go through tough times, we realize what matters and who matters, who around you can really count on. And I think that's really important. And I think through these experiences, and as one colleague said I wrote about True North, rubbing up against the world, being in the real world. I think one of the greatest things that my University, Georgia Tech did was co-ops. And there are far higher percentage of co-ops today. In the old days, people often became co-ops to pay their way through school. That's still true. But I can tell you far higher percentage, because they're getting the work experience and the companies love it. I know people here do that, or work while you go to school. And it's that dual experience, because you take what you learn and then you apply it directly into the workplace. You don't go through 10 years of education before you apply it. You're applying it every day. So I think the value of that kind of education is really critical. And it's interesting to see a school like Georgia Tech, as they raise their standards, the percentage of co-ops go up. More and more people are taking 5 and 6 years, not because they're working, but also because they're really enjoying applying their learning directly. And I think that's critical. But in you doing that, that's how you learn who you are. I remember as a young kid, I was an industrial engineer. I would go into these factories, and that was the days of time and motion studies in the early 60s. And I was working for Lear Siegler and the Learjet Avionics, and I had a clipboard like this, and I'm going around with my stopwatch timing the motions of these guys that were in their 50s, part of the union, and they've been doing their job for 30 years, and here I'm some 19-year-old kid telling them how they could do it more efficiently. What arrogance, eh? And that was my job. But that idea that we didn't listen to the frontline people. I tell you, at Medtronic, if we had a problem, you just go sit. I used to sit in lunch with all of our people working back. You say, how are things going? Well, Mr. George, we can't produce a quality product because our equipment's not working well. You want to know what the quality problems are? Listen to the frontline people. That's what went wrong at Boeing. That's what went wrong at General Motors. No one ever listened to the people on the front lines. They know. They'll tell you, by the way. They aren't worried about politics or trying to impress you. They'll tell you what's going on. But then you got to take action on that. You got to really listen and be there for people. But I think in these ways, through our life stories, through our crucibles, through learning who we are in the real world, we really gain that self-awareness, and we can find what is our true north. And our true north is the essence of who we are, what motivates us, what pleases us, what are we excited about, and what are our greatest skills. And I would like to see everyone find their sweet spot. Now, this is a euphemistic term. We originally, in the first version of True North, we called it motivated capabilities. We everyone liked the term sweet spot. So what is your sweet spot? Your sweet spot is where you're in a job that you really are motivated by. You really love your work, and you're using your greatest strengths. We used to try to fix weaknesses. I had 2 decades of major companies in the 70s, 80s trying to fix my weaknesses. I failed every test because, I wasn't being who I was. They're trying to make me into something I wasn't. And I think if we play to people's strengths and give them the opportunity to bloom where they're planted again, find a job where they're excited about the work and they're really good at it, they're going to be successful. And the organization is going to be very successful. And I think if we can do that and honor people that do that, we will find. So for you, are you in your sweet spot? Are you doing a job that you love and you're really good at it? You don't need a promotion. You need to find that job. And if you do that, then you're going to be successful. That's how you develop as a leader, to find those opportunities and take on more. Take on more right where you are. I think also, though, leadership implies a deep sense of values. There is no more important value than integrity. And I would never impose my values on people, except for the value of integrity. If I can't trust what you say, if you don't tell the truth, if you're not honest, if you're not transparent with me, I can't have a relationship with you. You can't be a friend, you can't be a colleague. I'm not going to work for a boss that doesn't do that, and I don't want to have someone working for me that doesn't tell the truth. But there are times when you're in a situation where your values are being challenged, and you have to make the call. And I remember with someone I got to know rather well, Ken Frazier, who's CEO of Merck, was serving on the American Manufacturing Council for the President of the United States. And after Charlottesville, he realized that there was a basic values conflict, and he had to resign. He called me 3 times that weekend to talk about what he was doing, and then after he did it. But a very courageous move, because his company, Merck, everything he does depends on the federal government. They could have been punished for that. They could have had all their new applications held up. They could have had products recalled. They could have had their prices arbitrarily lowered. But he had the courage of his convictions to stand for what he believes. And he was really putting his company at risk. And I remember his number 3 person at Merck told me, he said, you know, when he did that, every single employee was 100% behind him, because we stand for values here. I remember Ed Bastian at Delta. He just had a controversial thing of charging people $200 a year that don't want to be vaccinated down in Georgia, where there's vaccination rates are in the high 40s, I think. But he said a couple of years ago, he was against having guns in the airport. And their legislators got very upset with him. He didn't want people coming up to a gun and pointing it as one of his ticket agents. And so he opposed that publicly. And they decided to take a fuel subsidy and giving him for 30 years, about $40 billion a year away from him. And you know what he said? He said, Delta's values are not for sale. I'm not selling our values out there for $40. This is a value for my company. We're going to create a safe environment for our employees. Delta's values are not for sale. And he stood for his convictions. They took it away, and then eventually a year later they restored it. But that's not the point. The point is he stood for something. So I think that's really essential. And when you understand your true north, when you discover your true north, then I think that you can find your North Star. And that North Star is your leadership purpose. How do you want to lead? What's the real purpose of your leadership? You don't do that when you're just starting out. You do it through the working in the real world of experience. That's how you discover what is my North Star. And that North Star serves as your guide of what you want to do with your life. You may change jobs, you may go to a different career, you may go to a different organization, but that serves as a guide for you. So I think in the end, if we can be that empowering, engaging, inspiring leader, and there are 2 in this community I just like to cite who have done just that. One was our founder at Medtronic, Earl Bach, very modest guy, down to earth, not fancy, engineer from the University of Minnesota, and never went beyond that from an education standpoint. And he was out with the people all the time with ideas, very hands-on, not fancy like I said, but he was very empowering, inspiring to people. And he set the basis for Medtronic as to what the standards are back when it had himself and his brother-in-law, who then later left. And he was just starting, and they had 38 people in the garage up here in North Minneapolis. They didn't have heat there. They had space heaters. They were trying to keep warm in the winter. If you can imagine what that was like back in the 1960s. and 50s. But Earl Bachman was, to the end of his life, a very down-to-earth person. And he built a great company around a mission. Okay, a mission of restoring people to full life and health. Okay, of alleviating pain, restoring health, and extending life. And that mission of Medtronic has never deviated one bit. And he was totally passionate about that. And he let somebody else manage the numbers, but he was totally passionate. Another person in our community that's been a big factor in this school is Mark Mortensen, who died a couple of years ago. Both these people died a couple of years ago. These are the kind of people that leave a legacy we need to honor and recognize. Dave Mortensen's a friend of mine, but Mark really established something. He came into that company when I think they had all the 14 employees, and it grew to 4,000. They've done a lot of work for Medtronic when I was at Honeywell, but they've now created from $17 million business to a $5 billion business. But more importantly, it's a company that's true to their employees and to their customers. And they employ a lot of people. And they recognize the value of skilled labor, people they can count on, people know how to inspire people and know how to lead. And they left a legacy. So we have a great community here, but it's only great because of people like Mark Mortensen and Earl Bachman who give back and leave a legacy. But now, as these people pass from the scene, it's really up to us to pick up that banner, if you will, and lead and set the standards for what we want our community to be. I hear a lot of talk around the country, what's happening in Minneapolis. We thought it's a great place for concern. Yeah, we've got a lot of issues, but there's hope. There's hope in a place like Dunwoody. Last night I was down on the river. We walked all along the river for an hour and a half. You see what's happening in our waterfront. Everyone looked at just this as a shipping, just as an industrial place. Now it's a beautiful place. Had dinner at the first native restaurant in the country, Awamdi. First native country, and they serve all native food. Amazing place. But that's right down, in the heart of our own town. We need to do those kinds of things to really honor who we are and to find our North Star and to build our community. And that's really our task. And if we do so by stepping up as leaders, we can make this world a better place. We don't have to change. We don't have to go to Nicaragua. We don't have to go to Somalia. We can do it right here in our own community by recognizing the value of the people in the community, whether they're immigrants or whether families have been in this country for many centuries or generations. What's really important is we recognize the value that every single human person brings to the workplace and brings to life. And if we can do that, we'll create a great community. So just to close, I want to ask each of you to say, how are you discovering your true north? What North Star are you following? What are you doing to lead today to make a difference in the lives of the people around you, to bloom where you're planted? Because if you do that and we all collectively come together, we will have a great organization here at Dunwoody, and we'll have the core of a great community in which we live, and we can be a role model for our entire country and the entire nation. Thank you very much. Yeah, right here.
All right, so we've got about 15 minutes for Q&A. Is there anybody that wants to get started with a question for Bill? Gotta be somebody out there.
Nice work.
Yeah, go ahead.
Rob Scarlett here, associated with Sundance Family Foundation. I, for many years, ran an employee-owned company, 100% employee-owned, saw a high level of engagement. Have you some thoughts on employee ownership, the direction that companies might consider when they're looking for retiring from their business and looking at options for proceeding, having the company continue?
He's saying he ran an employee-owned company, and what are my thoughts on an employee-owned company? I think it's fantastic. I think employee ownership is essential. We need to align the interests. We had this era throw me nuts, for about 2 decades, 3 decades of shareholder primacy. And we're serving what I call, when I was at Medtronic, simply called the shareholder of the last 5 minutes, or last 5 seconds of the program trades. And I think when you have employee ownership, you align the interests of the company, the employees, the customers, and the non-employee owners if you have not 100%. So at Medtronic, we're public when I got there. And one of the things we did was when we had our 50th anniversary, we gave everyone 100 shares of stock. They were kind of shocked because it had a value of $7,000. We put it in an ESOP, and so they could watch that value. And then, of course, the stock escalated tremendously. And so that value just kept going up and up. And so they had the benefit of a nice retirement nest egg. One of the problems a lot of people have is, you know, that's why we have this income disparity, because people are making tremendous amount of money in stock, but, you know, 70% of the world can't afford to invest in stocks, and so they can't find the benefit. So they can do that with their own company, and then you can see the benefits of your work, so you know there's high-level alignment. Talking about Beth Ford, who runs a co-op there, she's owned by her suppliers, if you will, and her customers, you know, all the farmers. And talking to Sally Jewell, former Secretary of the Interior, who ran REI, that's another co-op. But it's not far off. I mean, the idea of aligning your customers' interests, your employees' interests, and your owner's interests, I think is ideal. And so thank you for that, what you're doing as a role model for that. Questions? Yes?
Hi, Bill. First, thanks for coming. Really enjoyed your comments. I'm Vicki Holt, recently retired from Protolabs, but been with the Dunwoody board now, 6 years. Really enjoyed it. It's a great organization. My question for you, you talked a lot about personal leadership, which I really also believe in, but you touched a little bit about purpose in companies when you talked about Medtronic. And I loved it, restoring health and extending life. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think we've learned through this pandemic is how companies and businesses really have this opportunity to step up and have an impact. Can you talk a little bit about that change that's taking place right now here?
Well, clearly, companies have not only an opportunity, they have a responsibility to set the standards. And when I first came here as a young man in my 20s, I was fortunate enough to meet Ken Dayton, who was kind of, if you will, the founder and CEO of Dayton Hudson, which became Target. And his whole thing was getting all the leaders of companies. He would take leaders and new CEOs that came to town and said, look, welcome to town, love to introduce you to some people around here. What organization, everyone here, he said, commits to an organization. What do you want to commit to? Get on the board, I'll talk to the people, see what we can do to get you, but you have a responsibility and your company has an obligation. And I think that's very true. It starts with your community. I don't know where we got away from this idea that the community doesn't matter. I told this story of Boeing. One of the underlying root cause of Boeing is they decided, because they got $238 million in a one-time tax credit, to move from their headquarters where they had their big factories in Seattle, Washington, where they've been since their founding, to Chicago, where they had no operations, and all to get a $200 million tax credit, which, by the way, 2 years later they didn't have. So, I mean, they already spent it, so to speak, or booked it. But, you know, they separate themselves from their roots. And I think companies, if you're going to bloom where you planted, you better build on your roots. And building on those roots are really critical. That's why I mentioned both Earl and Morton, because they stayed in this community. So yes, I think the companies have an obligation to build our community and to do so with a sense of purpose. My close friends that I've now recruited at Harvard Business School to kind of take my place in the courses I lead is Hubert Joly, former CEO of Best Buy. And he created these teen tech centers to try to help more people get educated in his teen tech centers. He made a huge commitment to that. But he inspired everyone with a sense of purpose for Best Buy, and he transformed everything. And he reframed the whole idea of what Best Buy wasn't just a sales organization, but really was to help you figure out how do you want to use technology, and to have people that work there that could really help you come into your homes. Corey Berry, his successor, 44 years old when she took over, fantastic leader. She stepped up to COVID. She had to change the entire business model because of COVID. She did so, and they're one of the most spectacular performers and doing well today as we come out of this period because of the moves she made and recognized how to change their business model and do everything online. If they didn't have a lot of people overnight who could really change their business model and who were computer experts and could program and make all the changes, and all the service people they have, the secret of Best Buy that Amazon can't match is they have 25,000 people in the Geek Squad that come into your home. And you can buy the equipment from Amazon. Who's going to set it up? How does it going to all play together? How do you make sure it all connects? Unless you're a genius, they'll have people come in and do all that for you. But guess what? They couldn't go into the home. So she created a whole different teleservice model, remote service. Same thing at Mayo Clinic. I remember John Rico Perugia told me that they had a 50x, now it's about 300x increase in their telemedicine. So it's because people couldn't come in, but they could deal with them through telemedicine. So I think these kinds of creative advances, that's not creating a whole new computer system, that's using the tools we have, but you have to have very skilled people to do that. So yeah, I think we all have that obligation, and getting behind things in our community that make a difference and make it a good place. Don't you want a place where your kids can go to school? Those of you who have kids, don't you want it where the schools are good, where they're safe? Don't you want to think you live in a safe neighborhood? Yes, of course. Don't you want every employee that you're bringing here to have that kind of, the arts, the joy, the parks? We have the best park system in the country. I'm out every single day in our park system. Of course, where I was on the Mississippi River last night is part of our park system. But I think having that kind of natural joy, it doesn't cost anything to bike around the lakes, except maybe the cost of your bike. It doesn't cost anything to walk around there or to go fishing, in one of our lakes. So yeah, natural things. And I think we all have a chance. My point is we have an obligation to build our community first. And companies that don't do that or kind of separate themselves from their roots are heading for trouble. And you'll find that a decade later, they aren't flourishing, they aren't doing well, because they lost sight of why they're in business. Why did General Electric collapse? Why did they go from the world's most valuable company? Medtronic's worth 50% more than General Electric. It's ridiculous. When I left there, General Electric was worth, 8 times more than Medtronic. Why? Because they didn't have a mission. Their mission was making money. They didn't even know what business they're in. They wrote an article for Fortune and said, what business is GE in? And they couldn't answer that. You can't say your business. And I just had lunch with Omar Ishrak, former CEO of Medtronic, that worked at GE for 16 years. I said, what was their mission? He said, making money. They don't care if they're business A, B, C. They go into one business and then abandon it. They had a big computer, a patient data system for Medtronic, for Mayo when I was on the board, and they just said, we're shutting it down. So Mayo had put on top of whatever they bought from GE over the years, another $500 million of custom software, which is all out the door because it ran on their equipment, which was being withdrawn. That's a lack of responsibility. So if you have a responsibility to your clients, and Mortensen has a project and it's not right, they gotta fix it, and that's the obligation we all have. Same with quality product in Medtronic or anywhere else. Thank you.
Go back here, and then we'll go to Steve, okay?
Thank you.
Here you go.
Thanks for being here and your thoughts. What are 2 or 3 significant personal obstacles that one might encounter in discovery of true north? And I'm especially interested in the ones that are not so obvious, that might be the deeper obstacles beyond what you think it might be.
Well, there are a lot of deep obstacles. I don't know where you want to start.
2 or 3.
Pardon?
Just 2 or 3 top ones.
No. I was talking to a young man yesterday. I'm doing a 3rd version of Discovery True North. I'm going to call it True North, the New Generation of Leaders. So I was interviewing him. He actually a young man that, believe it or not, he left home at 15. He lived in Ghana. His father had abandoned him. His father never really was part of the family. He just came and went. And he never really saw his father for 5 years at a time. But his mother sold all of her jewelry and everything else she could to raise money for him to get a one-way ticket to New York. And then somehow he was able to get to a bus station and get to Minnesota, and a family took him in, and he went to school here. And so then he, through the benefit of scholarships, he was able to go to Amherst College, the University of Minnesota Medical School, Actually, at that time, University of Minnesota Medical cost $41,000, and they said, of course, he had no money. And they said, because we aren't sure you'll stay here for 4 years, you have to give us a check for $164,000 for all 4 years right now up front. Of course, he had nothing. And a woman named Josie Johnson stepped up and helped finance his education because they had a shortage of black medical students that year. And so they gave it to this immigrant from Ghana, who was black, but and he was able to get through the school, and then he went from there to UCLA and did a 7-year rotation. So if you add those up, that's 15 years. So then he goes to work in Queens as a neurosurgeon. He's trained as a neurosurgeon. You can imagine the intricacy, the delicacy of removing tumors from the brain, just how precise this work, what kind of skills he has. And the people he worked with, the partners he worked with, their senior doctors, said, Mauricio, we only want you to work with black patients. We don't want you to work with white patients. And he said, I'm happy to work. I'll go into the neighborhood where I'll work with anyone, free patients. But he was so offended, he quit. I mean, that's a kind of deeper obstacle. If that's not racism, I don't know what it is. There's no difference between a black person's brain and a white person's brain. But just the idea that someone would say that to him. And so that kind of, things that we don't even think about. Immigrants, he's a Muslim. He encountered after 9/11, he was deeply hurt because he's a devout Muslim, as is Omar Ishraq. And everyone said all Muslims are terrorists. So, these things, sometimes we don't even realize what people have to go through and how they have to rise above challenges. I think people that come from very, very poor environments, most of the people that achieve success in corporations, they are not coming from wealthy families. They're the people that are dedicated and hardworking. They've had to overcome great difficulties. They had to pay their way through school. They had to work. They had to do all kinds of things. Maybe they had difficulties in their family. So I find the most successful people have all gone through these significant obstacles. And I know when I was very close to my mother, she died when I was 24. I was engaged, remarried. 18 months later, my fiance died, and the two people I was closest to in the world, they both died very suddenly. Malignant brain tumor in my fiance's case, 3 weeks to the day before the wedding. It was devastating. And the only thing that got me through that is having close friends around me that helped pull me through that, and some roommates back in Washington. But sometimes you face difficulties at times you least expected. A life-threatening illness, a problem, and you find out what really matters in life. When things are going your way, you think, hey, I'm doing great, no problem. Things don't go your way, that's where you really learn. And you learn who you can count on. Who are those people in your life you can count on when things don't go your way? And that's what really matters. And you want to surround yourself with those people. And when you are fortunate enough to achieve things as I have, you don't want people surrounding you. You just want to be there because of your title, or you're head of this company, or you're in this organization, or they can raise money from you. You want people around you that really care for you. And so who are you there for? And I think these things are all a two-way street. But those authentic relationships that you have are the ones that are really, really big. I have a men's group that's been meeting for, you won't believe this, but 46 years every Wednesday morning. I had a program yesterday. We meet from 7:15 to 8:30. We met for about a year and a half on Zoom. We were back to live action, so to speak, yesterday. One guy came in by Zoom because he was out of town. And we had a couple people about 20, 25 years ago, but it's invaluable. One of our members of our group just passed away. And, it was very hard. We were all there for each other. There for him. He had Alzheimer's, and then he had a heart attack. And maybe it was a blessing, that heart attack, but nonetheless, we were there for him, even when he couldn't really communicate with us or follow or track what we were doing. And so I think what you find in these situations when you go through tough times, you want to find out who's going to be there for you. And, I used to think when I was coming out of school when I was 22, life is like a rocket ship to the moon, up and away, and you achieve the top. And boy, a few shocks there. Doesn't always work out. But you have to find that place that's right for you and where you're inspired, but is through the crucibles, the tough times in life. And so some people say, I haven't had anything dramatic like that. Everyone's gone through challenging times. Everyone. I don't know any people that haven't. They just maybe are in denial about it. So thank you for the question. Next
I
question.
think we got time for Steve. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Stone. I'm a 1977 graduate here at Dunwoody in the electrical program. And if you're standing up there like you are today, and the audience here was the graduating class, you had 1 minute closing statement, what would you share with them?
I start out by saying, bloom where you planted. Use the skills you have. Do what you love. Do what you love, and use the strengths you have. You didn't create your own strengths. You create strengths came from your creator, regardless of your religious beliefs or if you have no religious beliefs. You didn't create your skills. Use those skills that you have from your creator to help other people. And do it right where you are. And do what you love. If you're in a job that you hate, you ought to rethink it, really rethink your life. And I think if you can do those two things, but you need to have the skills. And a place like Dunwoody builds it, but you're building skills throughout your life. I'm still building skills. It never ends. And I think we have to use that base to continue to become more experts so we don't become obsolete in the world because we continue to build skills. So I think that's critical. And then if you get to that point where you've done well financially, then help other people, follow behind to help them get an education. We have a lot of George scholars. I think with Alan Page, I mentioned him, the Page Educational Foundation, kids who weren't going to go to college had an opportunity. And same with my colleague Wynn Wallen, who did very well financially at Medtronic, created the Wallen Fellows so that people could go to school and get an education. The people I've talked to all have an education, but it should be an education that's relevant to you. What I'm trying to say without ripping on education, I just think a lot of it is what you should do or how you do on a IQ test really measure your acuity in math and reading and vocabulary. And that doesn't measure anything about various forms of intelligence like my son John has. Now, he's plenty smart, but I can tell you he has a kinetic intelligence. You see great athletes that have that mind-hand connection. Those are real skills that I don't have, and so I really admire him. So do what you love and use your God-given abilities, your creator-given abilities to help other people.
Well, why don't everybody join me in saying thank you to Bill for taking time. Our next lead speaker series will be Thursday, October 7th. Art Johnson will be our presenter. Art is author of The Art of Alignment, a best-selling book, and a president and owner of Orga Metrics. So mark that in your calendar. He's also a member of Dunwoody's Board of Trustees, and we'll look forward to a great time a month from now. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Bill, for a great presentation. Love, bloom where you're planted, right? Learn to grow with what you have. So great presentation. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you for being here.